The wooden door exploded inward at 4:03 in the morning. Splinters scattered across the living room floor of the small ranch house on Magnolia Street, mixing with the dust that hadn't settled since yesterday's cleaning. The sound was violence itself, a percussion grenade of wood and metal that shattered the silence of the Delta night. "Police search warrant, get down, get down." The voices came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by adrenaline and tactical training. 8 officers in full tactical gear flooded through the opening, their rifle-mounted flashlights cutting through the darkness like surgical blades. The beams found furniture first, a worn sofa with hand-crocheted blankets, a coffee table with a Bible study guide still open from the night before, family photos on the wall showing baptisms and church picnics. Then the lights found Reverend Marcus Hayes. He stumbled out of the hallway in his pajama pants and white undershirt, hands already raising toward the ceiling because he'd heard the shouting even before he understood what was happening. His wife Denise was screaming somewhere behind him, her voice raw with terror. Their daughter Maya, home from college for the summer, was crying in her bedroom. On the ground now. Marcus dropped to his knees on the carpet his congregation had helped him install 3 years ago. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from the primal fear that comes when your home becomes a war zone and you don't know why. Officer Jason Mitchell was the first through the door, his body camera recording everything in high-definition clarity that would later become evidence. His finger was indexed along the trigger guard of his rifle, proper protocol, but his heart was hammering against his tactical vest like it wanted out. This was supposed to be simple. The briefing had been clear: 327 Magnolia Street, known drug dealer, confidential informant, reliable, high-value target, get in, secure the suspect, find the product, get out. Mitchell had done a dozen raids just like this in his 8 years with the department. This was supposed to be routine. But something was wrong. Officer Sarah Chen was second through the door, her camera angle capturing what Mitchell's missed, the metal numbers above the entrance they'd just demolished. 329, not 327. She saw it, she knew immediately. "Mitchell," she said, her voice tight, "check the address." But Mitchell was already moving down the hallway, his training taking over, muscle memory driving him forward, even as his brain started to register the wrongness of everything around him. The house smelled like coffee and vanilla air freshener, not chemicals and desperation. The walls held children's artwork and mission trip photos, not the bare paranoia of a trap house. Sergeant David Brooks was third in, the supervisor, the one whose decisions would matter most. His camera captured him glancing at his clipboard, then at the broken door frame, then at the Reverend on the floor. "What number is this?" Brooks asked, but his voice lacked urgency. It was a question asked to fill space while he decided what to do next. 329, Chen said clearly. "We need 327. The raid had lasted 58 seconds so far. Marcus kept his hands up, his mind racing through possibilities. Was this a mistake? Was someone using his address for something illegal? Had one of the youth from his program gotten him in trouble somehow? His wife was still screaming, and he wanted to turn around and tell her it would be okay, but he knew better than to move. He'd grown up in the Delta. He knew exactly how this could end. "Sir," he said, his voice steady despite the fear flooding his system. "I'm Reverend Marcus Hayes. I think there's been a mistake. This is my home. I live here with my wife and daughter. I'm a pastor at..." "Shut up," Officer Derek Williams snapped, his own camera showing him moving past the Reverend toward the bedrooms. "Don't move, don't talk." Brooks stood in the living room, his weapon lowering slightly. The information was processing. Wrong house. They'd hit the wrong house. It happened sometimes. Bad intel, transposed numbers, outdated maps. Standard procedure was to apologize, secure the scene, document the error, and leave. There would be paperwork, there would be questions, but it would be manageable. That's what should have happened. But Brooks was thinking about other things. He was thinking about the 3-month investigation that led to this warrant. He was thinking about the confidential informant who swore the dealer lived on this block. He was thinking about his lieutenant who'd promised big things if this raid produced results. He was thinking about the overtime budget they'd blown on surveillance. He was thinking about how he couldn't go back empty-handed. "Keep searching," Brooks said quietly. Chen turned to look at him. "Sarge, this is the wrong." "I said keep searching," Brooks repeated louder now. "We have exigent circumstances. We breached, we secure protocol." "That wasn't protocol, that was something else." Mitchell hesitated in the hallway, his camera catching the moment of decision. He could hear the Reverend's wife crying in the bedroom, could see the family photos on the walls, could feel the wrongness settling into his bones like cold water. But Brooks was his sergeant. Brooks had 12 years on the force. Brooks knew what he was doing.
Dead on home.
Living room clear, Williams called out, his hands already pulling cushions off the couch, his fingers running along baseboards. Master bedroom clear, Chen said, but her voice was different now, flat, resigned to something she didn't want to be part of. Marcus watched them tear through his home, watched them dump his wife's jewelry box onto the bed, watched them open drawers and closets and cabinets. His daughter was crying harder now, and he could hear an officer in her room going through her things, and something inside him shifted from fear to rage. "You don't have the right," he said louder now. "This is the wrong house. You need to stop." Brooks walked over and stood above him. The sergeant's camera captured the Reverend's face, defiant, angry, terrified, all at once. "You got something to hide, Reverend?" Brooks asked. "No, but you don't have the right to. We have a warrant, we have probable cause, and you're going to sit there and be quiet while we finish our job." The raid was 3 minutes old now. In Maya's bedroom, Officer Williams found her laptop and began scrolling through her files, looking for what, he didn't even know, evidence of something, anything, a text message that seemed suspicious, photos that could be interpreted wrong, anything that could justify what they were doing. In the kitchen, Mitchell opened the refrigerator, looked inside at the milk and eggs and leftover casserole from Sunday dinner, and felt something break inside him. This wasn't right, this had never been right, but he was in it now, and there was no good way out. Chen was in the bathroom, going through the medicine cabinet, documenting every prescription bottle with her camera. Prozac for Denise Hayes, blood pressure medication for Marcus, everything legal, everything normal, everything wrong. The house was small, 1,200 square feet of modest Delta living. It took them 11 minutes to search every inch of it. They found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no evidence of any crime whatsoever. Just a family's life laid bare and violated, their privacy shredded, their sense of safety destroyed. Brooks stood in the living room looking at the destruction they'd caused, the broken door letting in the humid Mississippi night air, the couch cushions scattered, the drawers hanging open. The family huddled together now on the floor, Marcus's arms around his wife and daughter, all of them shaking. The sergeant's camera was still recording, everything was being captured, every decision, every moment. He should have apologized, he should have called it, packed up, and left. But that's not what happened next. "Bag the laptop," Brooks said to Williams, "and the cell phones, all of them." Chen's head snapped up. "What?" "Evidence," Brooks said simply. "We'll process it downtown." "Evidence of what?" Marcus demanded, standing now, his fear transforming into something harder. "You're in the wrong house, you have no right to take anything." Brooks turned to face him, and for a moment the two men locked eyes, the Reverend and the sergeant, the victim and the architect of this disaster, both of them knowing this moment would define everything that came after. "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down," Brooks said. "I am calm, but you're stealing my property. We're securing evidence related to an ongoing investigation." "What investigation? There's nothing here." The conversation was escalating, voices rising, the situation spiraling. Mitchell could feel it happening, could sense the danger building like a storm. He wanted to say something, wanted to stop this, but the words wouldn't come. Williams had Maya's laptop in an evidence bag. Another officer had collected the cell phones from the master bedroom. They were really doing this. They were really going to take this family's property from the house they'd invaded by mistake and try to find something, anything, to justify it all. Marcus Hayes made a decision then, the same decision that would haunt him for months afterward. He pulled out his own phone, the one they hadn't found yet because it was in his pajama pocket, and he started recording. "I'm documenting this," he said clearly. "I'm a citizen. I have the right to record police in my own home, and I'm telling you that you do not have permission to take my family's property." Brooks's jaw tightened. "Put the phone down, sir." "No, that's evidence. You need to surrender it." "This is my phone in my house that you entered by mistake. I'm not surrendering anything." The standoff lasted 17 seconds, though it felt longer. The other officers had stopped moving, everyone frozen, waiting to see how this would resolve. Then Brooks reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need a supervisor to 329 Magnolia. and someone check that Warrant address for me." The response crackled back within 30 seconds. "Warrant address is 327 Magnolia, Sergeant." Silence filled the violated home. Chen closed her eyes. Mitchell's hand went to his forehead. William stood holding the laptop bag, suddenly understanding what they'd all become. Brooks stared at Marcus Hayes, at the phone still recording, at the family still trembling, at the disaster he'd created by refusing to admit the obvious truth. "Everyone out," Brooks finally said. "Secure the scene and wait outside." The officers filed out, their cameras capturing their retreat, their silence speaking volumes. Only Brooks remained, standing in the ruined living room, looking at the Reverend who'd done nothing wrong except be home when they kicked in his door. "This was a mistake," Brooks said. "Yes," Marcus replied, "it was. We'll have someone come fix your door, file a claim for any damages." "A claim? That's procedure." "Procedure," Marcus repeated, his voice hollow. "My daughter is traumatized, my wife hasn't stopped shaking. You destroyed our sense of safety in our own home, and you're talking about filing a claim." Brooks had no answer to that. He walked out, leaving the Hayes family standing in their broken home, the night air flowing through the splintered doorframe, the question hanging in the darkness: what happens next? The body cameras had captured it all. But the story was just beginning. The sun rose over the delta 6 hours after the raid, painting the cotton fields in shades of amber and gold that had nothing to do with the darkness spreading through the Clarkston Police Department. Sergeant David Brooks sat in the briefing room at headquarters, watching the body camera footage for the third time. Lieutenant Raymond Foster stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw working like he was chewing glass. On the screen, Marcus Hayes' voice played again. "This is the wrong house. You need to stop." And Brooks's response: "We have a warrant. We have probable cause." Foster reached over and paused the video. The frozen image showed the Reverend on his knees, hands up, fear and confusion written across his face in high definition. "Tell me how this happened," Foster said quietly, the kind of quiet that was worse than yelling. Brooks didn't turn around. Clerical error. The informant said Magnolia Street. The warrant application had 327, but the house numbers were dark. It was 0400 and you realized it was wrong within 60 seconds, Foster interrupted. "Chen's footage shows her calling out the address at 58 seconds. Your footage shows you looking at the warrant at 1 minute 12 seconds, so you knew." "Yes, sir. And you kept searching anyway. I made a tactical decision based on exigent circumstances and—" "Don't," Foster's voice cracked like a whip, "don't give me the tactical bullshit. You knew it was wrong and you kept going. Why?" Brooks finally turned around. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform still smelling like the fierce sweat from the raid. "Because we'd put 3 months into this investigation. Because the CI swore the dealer was on that block. Because I thought maybe." "Maybe what? Maybe you'd get lucky and find something anyway. Maybe you could justify breaking into an innocent family's home if you just searched hard enough." The silence stretched between them. Foster walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where the morning shift was arriving. Good cops, decent people, all of them about to be stained by what happened on Magnolia Street. "The Reverend is Marcus Hayes," Foster said. "Do you know who that is?" "I do now. First Baptist Church, been in Clarkston for 8 years. Runs the youth outreach program, does prison ministry, coaches Little Leg. His daughter Maya's pre-med at Ole Miss, 4.0 GPA. His wife Denise teaches 3rd grade at Martin Luther King Elementary." Foster turned back to face Brooks. "They're not just innocent, they're pillars of this community, and you didn't just raid their house. You traumatized them, destroyed their property, and then tried to take their electronics to cover your ass." "Oh, I was trying to." "I know exactly what you were trying to do. I've seen it before. Cop makes a mistake, gets in too deep, figures maybe he can find something to justify it after the fact." Foster leaned against his desk. "How'd that work out?" Brooks said nothing. "The laptop you bagged," Foster continued, "belongs to a 20-year-old college student. You know what's on it: class notes, Netflix, text messages with her boyfriend, and now we have to explain why we seized it from her bedroom without cause." He pulled out another folder. "The phones you wanted to take, one belongs to a pastor, one belongs to an elementary school teacher, both spotless records, both now considering filing complaints." "Are they lawyering up?" "Not yet, but Reverend Hayes called ACLU at 0600, and he's got his own footage." Brooks's stomach dropped. His phone. The one you tried to confiscate, yeah, he recorded the whole confrontation, including you telling him you had probable cause when you knew damn well you didn't. Foster opened the folder, revealing printed stills from Marcus's video. It's already backed up to cloud storage, already sent to his attorney, already beyond our reach. The door opened and Chief Angela Morrison walked in. She was 53, 28 years on the force, and she looked like she'd aged a decade overnight. She didn't sit down. "Gentlemen," she said, "we have a problem." She pulled out her own tablet and placed it on the conference table. On the screen was a local news website. The headline read, "Clarkston Police Raid Wrong Home. Pastor and Family Terrorized in Pre-Dawn Mistake." How Brooks started. "Marcus Hayes has a cousin who works at the Delta Times," Morrison said. "Story broke 20 minutes ago. We've got 6 news vans en route. CNN is calling. The NAACP regional director is demanding answers, and the mayor wants to see me in an hour." She looked at Brooks with something between disappointment and disgust. "You have destroyed this department's credibility in one night." Brooks felt the walls closing in. "Chief, I can explain." "No," Morrison said flatly, "you can't, because there is no explanation that makes this acceptable. You breached the wrong house, you knew it was wrong, and instead of apologizing and leaving, you continued an illegal search hoping to find something to justify your mistake." She picked up the tablet. "That's not police work, that's a fishing expedition, and it's going to cost us everything." Foster cleared his throat. "We need to talk about damage control." Morrison nodded slowly. "We're going to need a statement. We're going to need to put someone in front of the cameras, and we're going to need to make this right with the Hayes family before this becomes a federal civil rights case." "What are you thinking?" Foster asked. The chief was quiet for a long moment, her mind working through scenarios, calculating political realities, weighing careers against justice. "We admit the mistake," she finally said. "Full transparency, we apologize publicly. We offer compensation for the door and any damages. We implement new training protocols. We review our warrant procedures. And we throw Brooks under the bus," Foster finished. Morrison looked at the sergeant. "You made choices last night. Choices that violated policy, violated procedure, and violated the trust this community has in us. Those choices have consequences." Brooks felt his career crumbling. "I've got 8 years on this force, commendations, good arrests, one mistake and—" "It wasn't one mistake," Morrison interrupted. "It was a series of decisions, each one worse than the last. You chose to keep searching. You chose to seize property. You chose to try to intimidate a citizen who was exercising his rights, and now you're choosing to call it a mistake instead of what it really was." "Which is abuse of power." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Brooks stood up, his face flushing. "I was doing my job. I was trying to make the case work. You want results, you want arrests, you want wins, and when we go after them, when we do what it takes, suddenly we're the bad guys. When you violate the Constitution to get those wins," Morrison's voice was steel, "yes, you're the bad guys." Foster stepped between them. "Everyone needs to calm down. We need to focus on." His radio crackled. "Lieutenant Foster, you're needed in the lobby. The Hayes family is here with their attorney." The 3 officers looked at each other. "Already," Brooks whispered. Morrison straightened her uniform. "Let's go find out what they want." The lobby of Clarkston Police Department was small-town functional, linoleum floors, bulletin boards with community notices, a desk sergeant who'd worked there for 20 years. Reverend Marcus Hayes stood near the entrance, still in the same clothes from the raid, looking like he hadn't slept. Denise stood beside him, her hand gripping his. Maya was there too, her eyes red from crying. And beside them stood attorney Jennifer Walsh. Morrison recognized her immediately. Walsh was out of Jackson, civil rights litigation, had won cases against 3 Mississippi police departments in the last 5 years. Her presence meant this was already beyond local damage control. "Chief Morrison," Walsh said, extending her hand, professional, cordial, dangerous. "Thank you for seeing us without an appointment." Morrison shook her hand. "Of course, Reverend Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, I want to first say how deeply sorry I am about what happened last night." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Are you sorry it happened, or sorry we're here?" "Direct, fair question." "Both," Morrison admitted, "but mostly the first." Walsh pulled out a folder. "My clients have asked me to deliver this formal complaint documenting the events of this morning's illegal raid, the subsequent illegal search, and the attempted illegal seizure of property." We're filing it with your department, with the Mississippi Attorney General, and with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Foster's jaw tightened. Federal involvement meant this was spiraling beyond their control. We're conducting our own investigation, Morrison said. We take this very seriously. I'm sure you do, Walsh replied, which is why we're also demanding immediate access to all body camera footage, all radio communications, all warrant documents, and all materials related to the confidential informant whose information led to this raid. Some of that is protected under what investigative privilege? There is no investigation. You raided the wrong house. There is no active case against my clients. There is no pending prosecution, which means there is no legal basis to withhold that information. Walsh's voice remained calm, but her meaning was clear. We know the law better than you do. Marcus spoke for the first time since the introductions. I want to know why, that's all. I want to know why you came to my home, why you terrorized my family, and why, after you knew it was wrong, you kept going. Morrison looked at him, really looked at him, saw the exhaustion, the violation, the anger simmering beneath the surface. She'd been a cop long enough to recognize when someone's faith in the system had been shattered. We're reviewing the circumstances, she said carefully. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. Denise spoke up, her voice shaking. My daughter can't sleep. She keeps hearing the door breaking. She keeps seeing the guns. She's supposed to go back to school in 2 weeks, but she's afraid to be alone. What are you going to do about that? There was no policy for that, no procedure, no form to fill out. We'll provide contact information for counseling services, Foster offered weakly. Counseling, Denise repeated, the word like ash in her mouth. For trauma your officers caused. Walsh closed her folder. Chief Morrison, my clients came here in good faith to give you an opportunity to make this right before it becomes very public and very expensive, but I need to be clear about what making this right means. I'm listening. First, full transparency, all footage, all documents, all communications. Second, a public apology and acceptance of responsibility. Third, disciplinary action against the officers involved, particularly Sergeant Brooks. Fourth, compensation for damages, both physical and psychological. And fifth, policy changes to ensure this never happens again. Morrison felt the trap closing. Everything Walsh was asking for was reasonable, and that was the problem. Refusing any of it would look like a cover-up. I can't promise disciplinary outcomes before the investigation is complete, Morrison said. Then complete it quickly, because every day that passes without accountability is a day my clients relive their trauma. And it's a day closer to us filing a federal lawsuit that will cost this town millions. Marcus looked at Morrison directly. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because what happened to my family was wrong, and because I know if it happened to us, to a pastor, to a teacher, to people who have never had so much as a parking ticket, it's happened to others who didn't have the resources to fight back. He was right, and Morrison knew it. The department had cut corners before, had pushed the limits of warrants before, had counted on people not knowing their rights, not having attorneys, not being able to fight back. But Marcus Hayes was different. He had education, resources, community standing, and a video that told the truth. Give me 72 hours, Morrison said. I'll review everything personally. I'll make decisions, and I'll give you answers. Walsh looked at her clients. Marcus nodded slowly. 72 hours, Walsh agreed. But understand, if those answers aren't satisfactory, we go public with everything, and I mean everything. Bodycam footage, the video Reverend Hayes recorded, timeline of decisions, all of it. They shook hands again, but it felt more like a ceasefire than a resolution. As the Hayes family and their attorney left, Foster turned to Morrison. We can't give them everything they want. Why not? Because it sets a precedent, because it makes us look weak, because it's the right thing to do, Morrison finished. Ray, we screwed up badly, and if we don't own it completely, we lose everything. The community's trust, federal oversight, our jobs, everything. Brooks had been quiet through the whole exchange, but now he spoke up. So you're going to sacrifice me to save the department? Morrison looked at him. You sacrificed yourself when you kept searching that house after you knew it was wrong. I'm just deciding whether to go down with you or save what I can. 8 years, Brooks said again. 8 years of good work. Doesn't matter, not anymore, because those cameras captured 19 minutes that undo all of it. Foster's radio crackled again. "Chief, the news vans are setting up outside. They're asking for a statement." Morrison took a deep breath. "Tell them I'll be out in 10 minutes." She walked to her office, leaving Brooks and Foster in the lobby. Through the window, she could see the media gathering like vultures. Beyond them, the morning shift officers were arriving, unaware that their workplace had become a crime scene of a different kind. Her phone buzzed, a text from the mayor, "Fix this or you're done." Another text, this one from a number she didn't recognize. "The whole world is watching. Do the right thing. MH." Marcus Hayes, even now, even after everything, he was giving her a chance to choose accountability over cover-up. Morrison pulled up the body camera footage on her computer, watched it again, watched Brooks make the decision to keep searching, watched Chen's face fall when she realized what was happening, watched Mitchell hesitate in the hallway, caught between orders and conscience. She paused on Marcus Hayes's face, the moment when he understood that the people who were supposed to protect him were the threat. Her desk phone rang, the mayor.
She didn't answer.
Instead, she opened a new document and started typing. Not a statement, not talking points, but the truth, what had happened, why it was wrong, what she was going to do about it. The truth was going to hurt. It was going to end careers, including possibly her own. It was going to cost the department money and credibility. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was becoming the thing she'd spent 28 years fighting against. A system that protected itself instead of the people it served. Morrison finished typing, printed the document, and walked back to the lobby. She handed copies to Foster and Brooks. "This is what I'm saying to the press," she told them. "Read it. If you have objections, now's the time." Brooks read it, his face going pale. "You're admitting everything. You're throwing me under the bus. I'm telling the truth," Morrison said, "and you're suspended pending investigation. Badge and gun, now."
"No."
Brooks stared at her for a long moment, then slowly unbuckled his belt and handed over his service weapon and badge. His hands were shaking, whether from anger or fear or shame, Morrison couldn't tell. "This is wrong," Brooks said. "Yes," Morrison agreed, "it is, but not for the reasons you think." She walked toward the exit, toward the cameras, toward the moment that would define the rest of her career. Behind her, she heard Foster on the phone, already calling the union rep, already building the defense. But Morrison was done defending the indefensible. Outside, the cameras turned toward her, microphones extended, reporters shouted questions. She held up her hand for silence, and somehow they gave it to her. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Chief Angela Morrison of the Clarkston Police Department. At approximately 4:03 this morning, officers from this department executed a search warrant at what we believe to be 327 Magnolia Street. The actual address breached was 329 Magnolia Street, the home of Reverend Marcus Hayes and his family." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. Within 60 seconds of entry, officers realized the error. The proper procedure at that point would have been to immediately cease the search, secure the scene, apologize, and withdraw. That did not happen. Instead, the search continued for approximately 19 minutes. This was wrong. It was a violation of the Hayes family's constitutional rights, and I take full responsibility for the culture that allowed it to happen. The reporters erupted with questions. She ignored them and continued. "Sergeant David Brooks, the supervising officer on scene, has been suspended pending a full investigation. All body camera footage will be released to the Hayes family and their attorney. We are implementing immediate changes to our warrant execution procedures, and we are inviting the Department of Justice to review our practices to ensure this never happens again." More shouting questions. Morrison spotted Marcus Hayes at the edge of the crowd watching her. Their eyes met.
"She hoped he could see that she meant it."
"The Hayes family deserves justice," Morrison said, "and they're going to get it. Even if that means holding ourselves accountable. Thank you." She turned and walked back inside, ignoring the chaos behind her. Foster was waiting. That was political suicide. Probably, Morrison agreed, but it was the right thing to do. The union is going to fight the suspension. Brooks has rights, due process. Then we'll follow due process, but the outcome won't change. He violated policy. He violated rights. He's done. Her phone buzzed again, another text from the unknown number. "Thank you, MH." Morrison allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Outside, the media frenzy continued. Inside, the department began the painful process of accountability, and somewhere in Clarkston, a pastor and his family tried to figure out how to feel safe in their own home again. The story was far from over, but at least now the truth was finally being told. The video went viral within 48 hours. Not the body camera footage that was still tied up in legal procedures, redaction reviews, and departmental protocols, but Marcus Hayes' cell phone recording, the one he'd made during those final confrontational moments in his living room, hit social media like a hurricane making landfall. Someone Marcus never said who, but his cousin at the Delta Times had connections, uploaded it to Twitter at 9:30 on a Thursday morning. By noon, it had 50,000 views. By evening, 2 million. By the next morning, it was being discussed on Good Morning America, analyzed on CNN, and cited in opinion pieces from the New York Times to the Washington Post. The video was only 3 minutes and 42 seconds long, but it captured everything that mattered. Brooks's voice clear and authoritative. "We have a warrant, we have probable cause." Marcus's response steady despite the tremor underneath. "This is the wrong house. You don't have permission to take my family's property." The shaky footage of officers carrying evidence bags, the sound of Denise crying in the background, Maya's voice, young and terrified, "Dad, what's happening?" And Brooks's final words before the confrontation ended, "You need to calm down, sir." Those 5 words became the rallying cry. Hashtags spawned overnight. "Wrong house, no knock, calm down, sir, justice for Hayes, Delta disaster." Civil rights organizations across the country seized the moment. The ACLU issued a statement. The NAACP called for federal intervention. Black Lives Matter chapters from Jackson to Memphis organized solidarity protests. But it wasn't just activists, it was everyone. A white grandmother in Tupelo shared the video with the caption, "This could be any of our families." A police chief in Minnesota used it as a training example of what not to do. A congressman from Massachusetts called for hearings on no-knock warrants. The video didn't just show a police mistake. It showed the anatomy of how power, once deployed, resists admitting error. It showed the moment when someone in authority, faced with their own wrongdoing, chose to double down rather than step back. And America, exhausted from years of similar stories, was done accepting that choice. Marcus Hayes sat in his living room, the same living room that had been violated 6 days ago, watching his phone light up with notifications he couldn't possibly answer. Beside him, Jennifer Walsh was on her laptop, compiling the media requests into categories: legitimate news organizations, advocacy groups, true crime podcasts, documentary filmmakers, and the inevitable conspiracy theorists. "You've got interview requests from Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon, and Rachel Maddow," Walsh said without looking up. "Also Fox News, but I'd recommend against that unless you want to be asked if you were really innocent." Marcus laughed bitterly, because pastors are known for running drug operations. "You'd be surprised what narratives people will construct." Walsh closed her laptop. "We need to talk about strategy." Denise was in the kitchen making coffee she wouldn't drink. Maya was upstairs, supposedly doing homework but actually scrolling through social media, reading comments from strangers who either called her father a hero or suggested the raid was somehow justified. "What kind of strategy?" Marcus asked. "The kind that decides what you want the endgame to be." Walsh leaned forward. "Right now you have leverage, national attention, public sympathy, a clear case of constitutional violation. We can use this to get a settlement that changes your family's life, 7 figures easily, maybe more." "I don't want money." "I know you've said that, but money isn't just compensation, it's accountability. It hurts the city budget. It forces policy changes. It sends a message that this behavior has consequences." Marcus shook his head. "People will think I did this to get rich, that I'm exploiting what happened. Some people will think that no matter what you do, others will understand you're making the system pay for its failures." Walsh pulled out a folder. "But if you don't want to focus on settlement, then we focus on criminal charges. Brooks violated your rights under color of law. That's a federal crime. We push the DOJ to prosecute." "Will they?" "Honestly, maybe. The video helps. Chief Morrison's admission helps, but federal prosecutors are conservative with these cases. They need slam-dunk evidence and political will. We've got the first. The second depends on how much pressure we can maintain." Denise walked in carrying a tray with coffee no one wanted. She set it down and sat next to Marcus. "What if we just want our lives back?" Walsh's expression softened. Mrs. Hayes, I understand, but I need to be honest with you, your old life is gone. Whether you pursue this or not, you're now the family from the viral video. You're symbols, and symbols don't get privacy. That's not fair, Maya said from the stairs. They all turned to see her sitting halfway down, arms wrapped around her knees. We didn't ask for this. No, you didn't, Walsh agreed, but now you get to decide what you do with it. You can walk away, try to rebuild quietly, and watch this happen to someone else next month, or you can use this moment to change things. Marcus looked at his daughter, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she flinched at loud noises now, the way she'd started sleeping with her light on like when she was 6. Then he looked at his wife, who hadn't been able to go back to her classroom yet, who'd taken emergency leave because standing in front of 3rd graders and pretending everything was okay felt impossible. If we fight, he said slowly, what does that look like? Walsh pulled out another folder. Civil lawsuit, federal civil rights complaint, media campaign to maintain pressure, testimony at city council meetings, possibly congressional testimony if the reform bills gain traction. It's exhausting, it's invasive, and it won't bring you peace, at least not quickly. But it might prevent this from happening to someone else, and it might force changes that last beyond one news cycle. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock, the one that had hung there through Bible studies and family dinners and quiet evenings that now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. Another message, this one from a number he recognized, Officer Sarah Chen. Reverend Hayes, this is Officer Chen from the raid. I know I have no right to contact you, but I want you to know I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. What happened was wrong. I'm sorry I didn't do more to stop it. SC. He showed the message to Walsh. Interesting, she said. She's trying to get ahead of it, probably angling for immunity or a reduced punishment. Or maybe she actually feels bad, Denise offered. Maybe both. Marcus typed a response, thank you for reaching out, I hope the truth comes out. He hit send before he could overthink it. Across town, in a cramped apartment that smelled like stale beer and regret, David Brooks sat in his underwear watching his life disintegrate on cable news. The screen showed footage of protesters outside Clarkston City Hall, maybe 200 people, which didn't sound like much until you remembered Clarkston only had 9,000 residents total. Signs reading, accountability now, and Brooks must go, and wrong house equals wrong cop. His phone had died hours ago. He'd stopped charging it after the death threats started. Not that they bothered him as much as the calls from former colleagues who suddenly didn't recognize his number, or the email from his union rep explaining that while they'd provide a defense attorney, the optics were challenging. Challenging, that's what they called it when you became radioactive. Brooks grabbed another beer from the fridge, his 4th of the afternoon or maybe his 5th. He'd lost count, which was sort of the point. The knock on the door made him freeze. Brooks, open up, it's Foster. He considered pretending he wasn't home, but Foster had been his lieutenant for 6 years, had backed him on tough calls, had written commendations that led to promotions. If anyone deserved a conversation, it was Foster. Brooks opened the door. Foster looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw working that same pattern that meant he was trying to control his anger. You look like shit, Foster said. Thanks, come to fire me yourself. You're already suspended, can't fire you again. Foster walked past him into the apartment, took in the empty beer bottles, the unwashed dishes, the general decay. Jesus, Brooks, pull yourself together. Why? So I can look presentable for my perp walk. Foster turned to face him. The DOJ is opening an investigation. Civil Rights Division. They're looking at the whole department, but you're the focus. Chief Morrison is cooperating fully, which means she's giving them everything. Body cams, radio traffic, your entire personnel file, everything. Brooks sat down heavily on the couch. How bad? Bad enough that my attorney, and yes, I've got one now too because they're looking at supervisory negligence, says you're looking at potential federal charges. Deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, up to 10 years if they prove willfulness. 10 years. That's if they don't add conspiracy charges for trying to seize the phones, or false arrest, or a dozen other things they could charge if they want to make an example of you. Foster sat down across from him. Why'd you do it, David? Why'd you keep searching after you knew? Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Then, because I couldn't go back empty, 3 months of work, overtime budget blown, the lieutenant you expecting results, and I thought maybe the CI was close, maybe it was next door, maybe there was something there that would justify it. But there wasn't. No, there wasn't, just a family trying to sleep in their own house. Foster leaned back, rubbing his face. You know what the worst part is? I get it, I've been in that position. You're committed, you're invested, and admitting you're wrong feels like failure, so you push forward hoping it works out. But it doesn't. And now a pastor's daughter can't sleep, a teacher can't go back to work, and you're about to lose everything. Foster stood up. I came here to tell you that the union attorney wants to meet tomorrow. You need to be sober, you need to be honest, and you need to understand that the only play we've got is cooperation and remorse. You want me to grovel. I want you to take responsibility, because right now you're the face of everything people hate about policing. The arrogance, the abuse of power, the refusal to admit mistakes. If you want any chance of survival, you need to show that you understand what you did wrong. Brooks looked at him. Do you think I belong in prison? Foster was quiet for a long time. I think you made terrible choices that violated someone's rights. I think those choices deserve consequences, whether that's prison or losing your badge or something else, that's not up to me. He walked toward the door, then stopped. But I'll tell you this, the old way of handling this, circling the wagons, blaming the victim, waiting for it to blow over, that doesn't work anymore. The cameras are everywhere. The videos go viral. And the public is tired of watching cops protect each other instead of protecting them. So what do? You face it, you own it, and you hope that counts for something. Foster opened the door. Meetings at 10 tomorrow, County Courthouse, Conference Room B, don't be late. And David, don't drink any more tonight. You need to be clear-headed for what's coming. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Brooks sat alone in his apartment, the TV still droning coverage of his own destruction, the beer warming in his hand. On the screen, Marcus Hayes was being interviewed by a local reporter. What do you want to see happen? The reporter asked. Marcus's answer was immediate. I want the truth. I want accountability. And I want to make sure this never happens to another family. Brooks threw the beer bottle at the TV. It hit the screen but didn't break it, just left a wet streak sliding down over the Reverend's face. You want accountability, Brooks said to the empty room. You want to destroy my life over one mistake. But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't true. It wasn't one mistake. It was a series of choices, each one digging the hole deeper. And at the bottom of that hole was the truth he'd been avoiding. He'd valued his pride more than someone else's rights. And now everyone was going to pay for it. The Clarkston City Council, meeting 3 days later, was standing room only. The chamber, designed for maybe 75 people maximum, held over 200. They lined the walls, sat in the aisles, spilled out into the hallway. Local residents, activists from Jackson and Memphis, journalists from national outlets, and at the front, sitting quietly with their attorney, the Hayes family. Mayor Robert Jennings gavelled the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. He was 62, a former insurance salesman who'd won election on promises of fiscal responsibility and small-town values. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last week. Before we begin regular business, Jennings said, we're going to address the incident on Magnolia Street. Chief Morrison, if you come forward. Morrison walked to the podium, her dress uniform crisp, her bearing professional. But the dark circles under her eyes told the real story. Thank you, Mayor, Council members, citizens of Clarkston. She took a breath. In my 28 years as a police officer, I've made mistakes, I've had bad calls, I've had investigations go wrong. But what happened at 329 Magnolia Street wasn't just a mistake. It was a failure of leadership, of training, of culture. And I take full responsibility for that failure. Someone in the crowd shouted, taking responsibility means resigning. Jennings gavelled for order. Please let her finish. Morrison continued. In the past week, we've conducted a full internal review. We've cooperated with the Department of Justice investigation, and we've implemented immediate changes to our procedures. She pulled out a document. Effective immediately, all no-knock warrants must be personally approved by both the chief and the district attorney. All addresses must be verified by at least 2 officers before execution. All body cameras must be activated 30 minutes before any warrant service. And any officer who realizes a mistake during a raid has both the authority and the obligation to call it off, regardless of rank. That's nice, a woman in the front row said, but what about Brooks? Morrison's jaw tightened. Sergeant Brooks remains suspended pending the outcome of both the internal investigation and the federal inquiry. His future with this department will be determined by those findings. In other words, you're waiting to see if you can protect him, the woman shot back. In other words, we're following due process while also ensuring he never has the opportunity to violate someone's rights again. Marcus Hayes stood up. The room fell silent. Chief Morrison, he said, his voice carrying that pastoral authority that made people listen. I appreciate the procedural changes. I appreciate your public statements. I appreciate your cooperation, but I need to ask you a direct question. Go ahead, Reverend. Do you believe Sergeant Brooks committed a crime? Morrison looked at him. The entire room watched the calculation happening behind her eyes. Political survival versus moral obligation. Career preservation versus truth-telling. Yes, she finally said. I believe his actions that night constituted a deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and I've communicated that belief to the federal prosecutors. The room erupted, gasps, shouts, the sound of barriers breaking. Jennings gavelled desperately for order. Marcus sat back down, nodding slightly. He'd gotten what he needed, a public admission from the department's highest authority that what happened was criminal, not just procedural. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Citizens spoke, some defended the police, most didn't. A few called for defunding, others called for reform. One elderly black woman talked about being raided in 1973 on similarly false pretenses and never getting an apology. At least y'all got it on camera, she said to Marcus. In my day, it was your word against theirs, and nobody believed our word. When the public comment period finally ended, the council voted unanimously to approve a settlement negotiation with the Hayes family in an amount to be determined but not to exceed $2.5 million. Walsh leaned over to Marcus. That's higher than I expected. They're scared, Marcus whispered back. They're trying to make this go away. Will you let it? He looked at his wife, at his daughter, at the crowd of people who'd shown up because they saw their own vulnerability in his story. No, he said, we're just getting started. The settlement was finalized 3 weeks later. $1.8 million paid over 5 years, along with a formal apology, policy changes, and an agreement to bring in an outside firm to review the entire department's practices. Brooks was terminated. The federal investigation remained ongoing, but prosecutors indicated they were building a case. Officer Chen received a written reprimand but kept her job. She cooperated fully, testified honestly, and shown genuine remorse. Officer Mitchell took early retirement, his conscience unable to bear the weight of what he'd participated in. Chief Morrison survived, though barely. A vote of no confidence failed by a single council member. And Marcus Hayes became something he never wanted to be, a national figure in the conversation about police reform. He gave testimony before Congress, he spoke at rallies, he consulted with police departments trying to change their cultures. He started a foundation to help other families navigate similar violations. But late at night, when the speaking engagements were done and the interviews were over, he still checked the locks on his doors twice, still flinched when he heard sirens, still wondered if his daughter would ever feel truly safe again. Denise eventually went back to teaching, though she changed schools. Maya transferred to a different college, needing distance from the place that had become synonymous with trauma. The door was repaired, the house was cleaned, the possessions were returned. But some violations can't be fixed with money or apologies. Some betrayals leave scars that settlements can't heal. 6 months after the raid, on a quiet Sunday morning, Marcus stood in his pulpit at First Baptist Church and looked out at his congregation. They'd supported him through everything, meals when his family couldn't cook, prayers when they couldn't sleep, presence when isolation felt overwhelming. I've been asked many times, he began, if I forgive the officers who raided my home, if I forgive Sergeant Brooks for what he put my family through. The sanctuary was silent. And the truth is, I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, it's a process, a journey, and I'm not there yet. He paused. But I'll tell you what I have found: purpose in the pain, meaning in the violation, a calling to make sure what happened to us leads to protection for others. He looked up at the ceiling, at the cross hanging above the baptismal font. We didn't choose this story, but we get to choose what we do with it. We can let it destroy us, or we can let it transform us into people who fight for justice, who demand accountability, who refuse to let power go unchecked. Amen, someone in the congregation said. The door to our home can be repaired, Marcus continued, but the door to trust, to faith in institutions, to belief that the system works, that door was blown apart, and it's our job now to rebuild it, not by pretending it didn't happen, not by accepting empty apologies, but by demanding change, real change, lasting change. He closed his Bible. What happened to my family was wrong, but what we do next determines whether it was meaningless or meaningful, whether it was just another violation or the beginning of reformation. The congregation stood, applauding, supporting, believing. And somewhere across town, David Brooks sat in a different kind of sanctuary, a courtroom, listening to a federal prosecutor explain the charges against him. 2 stories, 2 reckonings, 2 very different futures. But both born from 19 minutes on Magnolia Street, when power met accountability and lost. The body cameras had captured everything. And this time the truth wouldn't stay buried. The bill was called the Marcus Hayes Act. It passed the Mississippi legislature with bipartisan support, requiring body cameras for all warrant executions, mandating independent review of no-knock warrants, and creating a citizen oversight board for police misconduct investigations. 17 other states introduced similar legislation. David Brooks served 22 months in federal prison on reduced charges after cooperating with prosecutors and showing what the judge called genuine remorse and acceptance of responsibility. He was released to a halfway house and banned from ever working in law enforcement again. Chief Morrison retired after implementing reforms that became a national model. She now consults with police departments on constitutional policing. Sarah Chen rose to sergeant and became the department's training officer, using her experience from that night to teach what not to do. Maya Hayes graduated pre-med with honors and is now in medical school, focusing on trauma psychology. Denise Hayes returned to teaching and started a support group for families affected by police violence. And Marcus Hayes still preaches every Sunday at First Baptist Church in Clarkston, Mississippi. But now, when he talks about justice, his congregation knows he's not speaking in abstractions. He's speaking from a night when 8 officers broke down his door at 4:03 in the morning. He's speaking from 19 minutes that changed everything. He's speaking from the wound that became a witness. And people listen, because sometimes the wrong house becomes the right message. Sometimes disaster becomes reformation. Sometimes the victim becomes the voice that couldn't be silenced. The door on Magnolia Street was fixed within a week. But the door to change, that one Marcus Hayes kicked wide open. And it's still open, waiting for the next family who needs justice. Waiting for the next officer who needs courage. Waiting for the next moment when accountability matters more than pride. The cameras are still recording. The truth is still being told. And the reckoning continues.